Greetings and salutations. Thank you for lending an ear to The Voice of the Times this Wednesday, November 18, 2020. For today's editorial, give the RCEP a chance. Over the weekend, 15 countries, including the Philippines, signed the China-led Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, trade agreement, creating the world's largest trade pact in terms of combined gross domestic product, or GDP, of the participating countries. The RCEP, which was introduced by China back in 2012, was signed at the conclusion of the recent meeting of Southeast Asian leaders on November 15. Apart from the Philippines and China, the other countries joining the pact include the rest of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN members, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. While many experts, including of course our own Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, have hailed the RCEP as a new opportunity to expand export, investment, and other forms of economic cooperation across Asia, critics have charged that it will primarily benefit Chinese industries at the expense of domestic businesses in the other participating countries. The perceived unfair advantage for China, in fact, was the primary reason given for India's exit from the RCEP last year. On the face of it, the RCEP does confer some advantages on China, but that does not necessarily translate to a disadvantage for other participating countries. Under the agreement, tariffs will be removed from about 61% of imports from ASEAN countries, Australia, and New Zealand, while about 56% of Chinese imports will be exempted. Given that the volume of Chinese exports is much greater than all of the other countries combined, that small difference in the percentage of duty-free trade substantially favors China. Another key feature of the RCEP is that it will harmonize the rules of the various ASEAN Plus One trade agreements that are currently in existence, that is, trade agreements between the ASEAN and China, between the ASEAN and Australia, between the ASEAN and Japan, and so on. While the ASEAN is the common denominator in all of these, the harmonized rules tend to follow those that are in place for China, as it is the ASEAN's largest trading partner. Despite having taken 8 years to negotiate, much of the RCEP is aspirational, which critics of the trade pact also find off-putting. How precisely the RCEP will operationalize such language as institutionalization of support and cooperation geared towards inclusive growth that will benefit micro, small, and medium enterprises, strong protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights, enhanced cooperation on e-commerce, and time-bound consultations for resolving issues and concerns on trade measures, among other things, is still to be determined. Even though the Philippines has signed on to the RCEP, it will not formally join the trade pact until the agreement is ratified by the Senate and signed by President Duterte. While there may be aspects of the RCEP for which skepticism is justified, we believe the formal passage and acceptance of the trade agreement should be made and the new regional collective given a chance to work. The main basis for this view is admittedly simple practicality. The countries which are or will be a part of the RCEP once it is ratified by the individual signatories constitute a little more than half of the Philippines' total export market. If the Philippines were not a part of the RCEP, those trade relationships could probably be preserved, but it is not a guarantee that they would all be in their current form. The Philippines would, in effect, be competing for import markets with a solid block of 14 other countries, including 2 of the world's largest economies, and that is an extremely difficult, if not completely foolhardy proposition. The completion of the RCEP is also coming at a time when the national and global economies are in tatters, thanks to the ill effects, no pun intended, of the coronavirus pandemic. Whatever its potential risks, the RCEP does clearly offer expanded market opportunities to Philippine enterprises. The potential economic boost is something the country quite frankly cannot afford to overlook at this point. The sooner the RCEP is formally ratified, the sooner the Philippines can begin to use it to help rebuild our battered economy, which is something everyone can agree should be a top priority. And that's the editorial for Wednesday, November 18, 2020. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to our digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and listen to The Voice of the Times.